The night my dignity was sold for applause and polished floors. I learned that blood is not always thicker than pride. The hall shimmered like a palace. Gold chandeliers dripping with crystal raindrops. Floor gleaming like water under moonlight. Lace dresses swishing with perfume and arrogance. Drums and ululation filled the air, each beat echoing celebration. Celebration I was not invited to belong to. It was my grandson Yuzo's engagement ceremony. The boy I raised with these tired hands when his mother died. The boy whose fever I sat through night after night. Who clung to my wrapper and called me Nne Oma, my good mother. Before the world convinced him that money was a better parent. I stood at the entrance of the hall in my clean but faded ankara. My back straight though my heart trembled. A young usher in a shiny red uniform checked the guest list. He looked at me the way one looks at a stray goat wandering into a royal courtyard. Name? He asked, eyes narrowed. Nne Nwoko, grandmother of the groom. He glanced at the glittering hall behind him, then back at my worn sandals. Hesitated, and cleared his throat. You will sit over there, Mama, behind the generator room. Please stay out of the photo area. It's what the family requested. Requested. Family. My breath shuddered like dry leaves. He pointed to a narrow corridor at the edge of the building. Dark, lined with crates and the loud buzz of machinery. I looked up toward the dazzling center of the hall and saw Yuzo. Laughing, handsome in his embroidered agbada. Holding the hand of his bride-to-be, Chinello. A woman polished like glass and twice as cold. She glanced in my direction, expression tight as steel. Her friend whispered loudly enough for the wind to carry. How can a village grandmother sit with governors and business leaders? She will embarrass the table. Laughter followed, sharp and clean as a knife. My chest burned. My fingers trembled. Not because they rejected me. I had survived rejection before. But because Yuzo heard it and said nothing. He lowered his eyes like a man ashamed of the soil that birthed him. For the first time in 72 years, I felt small. Smaller than hunger, smaller than grief, smaller than dust. And just before my knees buckled. A voice, deep, steady, familiar like a drumbeat from another life. Rose behind me. Is this how they welcomed the woman who carried him on her back? The hall fell silent. The ushers froze. The music thinned like smoke. I turned, and the world tilted. Standing beneath the entrance arch was a tall man with silver hair. An ebony cane carved with the insignia of the old Eastern Regiment. A sharp black suit fitted with the quiet authority of decades. His eyes, dark and unblinking, held mine. My heart stumbled. Obinna? I whispered. Is it truly you? Because Obinna Nwoko, my brother, had died in the war. We buried an empty coffin. We cried over a name carved into stone. But here he stood, alive, strong, eyes glistening like rain. He walked to me slowly. Placed his warm hand over my trembling fingers. And whispered so only I could hear. Today, Nne, no one hides you in the shadows. Not while I am breathing. Then he lifted my hand gently and rested it on his arm. Standing tall beside me like a shield. We stepped forward, together, into the hall. And as we crossed the threshold, the music stuttered into silence. Guests turned. Faces blanched. Whispers cracked like lightning. Is that General Obinna Nwoko? I heard he owns Nwoko Agro, the biggest agricultural corporation in West Africa. But they said he was dead. Power shifted like wind changing direction. Chinello's painted smile collapsed. Yuzo's face drained white. The same people who mocked my sandals now stood like statues. And in that moment, in that single breathless step, I knew the seat they gave me was never mine. I was born for the front. I just forgot. But tonight, the world remembered. The hall swallowed us whole. Lights shimmering, whispers crawling through the air like restless ghosts. Obina guided me to the front. Past tables crowded with government officials. Business magnates dressed in brocade. Socialites glittering with diamonds and pride. No one laughed now. No one whispered carelessly. Eyes followed us like birds stalking a storm. At the main table, the very place where they had refused me, Obina pulled out a gilded chair and said in a voice that carried without shouting, "My sister sits here." Forks paused mid-air. Glasses trembled against white porcelain. Chinello's father, Chief Okafor, stiffened, his face tightening like rope on a pulling mast. "General Obina," he said with an oily smile. "We weren't informed you would grace the event." Obina rested both hands on his cane. Not leaning, but anchoring the room. "I do not need an invitation to protect my blood." Chief Okafor's smile thinned. His wife shifted uncomfortably. Their daughter Chinello stared at the tablecloth like it might swallow her. And Yuzo, the child whose first word was my name, stood frozen in the center of the stage, holding the microphone like it was suddenly too heavy. He swallowed hard and whispered, "Grandmother. I didn't know you would come." My voice was calm, but inside me a storm brewed. "You sent the invitation, Yuzo. You simply hoped I would be too small to accept it." His eyes flicked away, shame staining his face. Music struggled back to life, drums soft and uncertain. As people tried to pretend they had not just watched pride crack open. I took a slow breath, steadying myself, and turned to Obina. "How are you alive?" The words escaped like a prayer I'd been afraid to speak. He chuckled softly, a sound both warm and broken. "War does not kill everyone who disappears. Some are swallowed, pushed underground, forced to start again far from home." I stared into his eyes. Eyes I had memorized like scripture as a young girl. "For years, I searched for you. We buried your uniform. We sang the morning songs until our voices cracked." His jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing near his temple. "I fought in that war until the last bullet. When my battalion was ambushed, I was captured, taken across the border. The world forgot us. They declared us dead." My hands trembled. 12 years without home. 12 years praying he died quickly instead of suffering. He continued, voice low but fierce. "When I escaped, I had nothing. No documents, no name. I rebuilt myself stone by stone in foreign soil. I worked farms, slept under bridges, studied at night." A silence fell, reverent, heavy. "Years later, I helped build an agricultural empire. Mwoko Agro feeds 4 countries now. But I never returned because..." His voice cracked, a rare sight in a soldier. I was afraid of finding no one left. My throat tightened painfully. "You still had me, Obina." He reached for my hand again, grip firm. "I know that now. And seeing you in that dark corridor tonight. The woman who taught me courage and pride. I realized silence is also a kind of death." The hall's attention clung to every word. People leaned closer. Those who once looked down on me now looked up like students. Chief Okafor broke the quiet sharply. "General, this is an engagement celebration, not a family reunion." Obina turned slowly, gaze cold as steel. "And yet you found time to disgrace the woman who raised the groom." The chief stiffened. "It was a seating decision." "No," Obina cut in. "It was a decision to measure worth by wealth. But let me remind you, the ground that grows yam does not ask if the sun is wearing diamonds." Soft gasps rippled across the hall. Chinello fidgeted, then stood abruptly, her voice brittle. "General, with respect, she doesn't belong with the VIPs." My heart stopped for half a beat. Obina smiled. Not kindly, but like a king sharpening his sword. "For years, I searched for you. We buried your uniform. We sang the morning songs until our voices cracked." His jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing near his temple. I fought in that war until the last bullet. When my battalion was ambushed, I was captured, taken across the border. The world forgot us. They declared us dead. My hands trembled. 12 years without home. 12 years praying he died quickly instead of suffering. He continued, voice low but fierce. When I escaped, I had nothing. No documents, no name. I rebuilt myself stone by stone in foreign soil. I worked farms, slept under bridges, studied at night. A silence fell, reverent, heavy. Years later, I helped build an agricultural empire. Moko Agro feeds 4 countries now. But I never returned because... His voice cracked, a rare sight in a soldier. I was afraid of finding no one left. My throat tightened painfully. You still had me, Obinna. He reached for my hand again, grip firm. I know that now. And seeing you in that dark corridor tonight. The woman who taught me courage and pride. I realized silence is also a kind of death. The hall's attention clung to every word. People leaned closer. Those who once looked down on me now looked up like students. Chief Okafor broke the quiet sharply. General, this is an engagement celebration, not a family reunion. Obinna turned slowly, gaze cold as steel. And yet you found time to disgrace the woman who raised the groom. The chief stiffened. It was a seating decision. No, Obinna cut in. It was a decision to measure worth by wealth. But let me remind you, the ground that grows yam does not ask if the sun is wearing diamonds. Soft gasps rippled across the hall. Chinello fidgeted, then stood abruptly, her voice brittle. General, with respect, she doesn't belong with the VIPs. My heart stopped for half a beat. Obinna smiled. Not kindly, but like a king sharpening his sword. Child, you speak boldly for someone whose family owes my company more than 800 million naira. The room froze. Chinello's mother clutched her throat. Chief Okafor blinked, stunned. What debt? Someone whispered at a nearby table. Obinna tapped his cane once, decisively. Moko Agro holds the controlling stake in Okafor Farm Holdings. And the new expansion loan you took last year. The one still waiting for approval. He paused, letting silence stretch painfully. Sits on my desk. Shock crackled like fire. Chief Okafor's voice shook. You wouldn't dare collapse our project. I would dare anything to defend my blood. His voice cut the air like thunder. Even the musicians went still, hands frozen above drums. Chinello's eyes widened, glossed with fear. Yuzo stared at me, suddenly seeing what he had nearly thrown away. For the first time in years. I felt taller than every chandelier in that room. But deep inside, grief coiled like smoke. I looked at Obinna. Why now, brother? Why return on the night meant for joy? He turned to me, gaze soft. Because joy built on humiliation is not joy, it is poison. I swallowed hard, fighting the weight of tears. Then what happens next? I whispered. Obinna lifted his chin and answered clearly. Tomorrow, we let truth speak. Tonight, we make them watch. And somewhere inside that glittering hall, a new storm gathered. A storm carrying the power to rebuild or destroy everything. The music had become nothing but trembling air. A thin whisper drowning beneath the pounding silence that filled the hall. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some pretending to eat though their hands shook. Others watching us with the sharp hunger of vultures circling a wounded animal. The master of ceremonies, voice cracking, attempted to regain control. Ladies and gentlemen, if we may continue. But Obinna raised one hand. And the hall obeyed. His presence silenced the world more effectively than any microphone. He turned to Yuzo, whose fingers strangled the microphone so tightly his knuckles whitened. Yuzo, Obinna said. There are conversations that must not hide behind applause. Come. Bring your bride and her family. We will speak privately. It was not a request. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke. Reluctantly, Yuzo nodded, his face pale. Chinello hesitated, then took his arm, trying to hold on to dignity that slipped through her like sand. We moved toward the VIP lounge. A room with velvet seats, gold-trimmed curtains, and tall glass doors that muffled the breath of the crowd outside. Inside, the air was heavy. A mixture of perfume, fear, and unspoken truth. The door clicked shut behind us. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Obina said, calm but sharp as a blade. Explain to me why the woman who raised you, who sold her last goat to pay your school fees, was left outside like an uninvited beggar. Yuzo swallowed hard, eyes glued to the floor. His voice trembled. General. I never meant to dishonor her. I just thought it would be better. I lifted my hand, stopping him. Better for whom? My voice cracked softly. Better for you to pretend you grew from marble instead of red soil? He looked up, eyes glistening. Mama, I was going to bring you to the front after the speeches. Obina stepped closer, gaze burning. Then why assign her a seat that faced the generator exhaust? Silence smothered the room. Chief Okafor exhaled sharply. General, this is unnecessary drama. We arranged seating based on status and profile. Obina's cane struck the marble floor, the sound loud as thunder. Status? He leaned forward. And what status do you believe this woman carries? The chief stiffened. His wife wrung her gold bracelet until it twisted. Chinello's voice wavered, trembling with impatience. General, my family entertains high-profile guests, governors, investors. No disrespect, but someone of her background. I felt the insult like a slap to the soul. But before I could speak, Obina turned to her slowly. Child, do you know the greatest irony in this room? She blinked, confused. Obina's voice dropped low, dangerous, surgically calm. The land your family built its fortune on. The acres you inherited and used to produce cassava and palm oil belong legally to the Nwoko lineage. Chinello gasped. Her father shot to his feet. That is a lie. Obina's expression did not change. Barely 6 months before the war, our father leased that land to yours for 20 years. But while I was missing and the nation was rebuilding, you erased our signature and forged ownership documents. The words cut the room open. Yuzo's eyes widened in horror. Is that true? He demanded, voice shaking. Chief Okafor glared at him. Sit down, boy. This conversation is beyond you. But Yuzo did not sit. He stood straighter than I had ever seen, voice breaking. You made me ashamed of my own grandmother. And all this time you were the ones hiding shame. Chinello grabbed his arm desperately. Yuzo, please. He pulled away. Obina continued, dropping the final stone. The new agricultural audit launches Monday. When they open those documents, your crimes will light the sky. The chief's voice cracked into desperation. General, we can negotiate. There is no negotiation where dignity has been crushed, Obina answered. His gaze shifted to Yuzo, softening, like returning rain. My nephew. Who taught you to be ashamed of the woman who gave you life twice? The woman who buried her youth so you could rise? Yuzo's face collapsed, tears rolling freely now. He turned to me, voice shaking like a wounded drum. Mama, I am sorry. My lips trembled. The apology was heavy, too heavy to lift easily. You broke my heart, Yuzo, I whispered. The room swallowed the words whole. For a moment, no one breathed. And then Obina said the sentence that would change everything. Tomorrow morning, at the press conference, you will choose. Stand with truth and blood. Or drown with those who built their empire on lies. Yuzo trembled. Chinello stiffened, realizing the walls around her were collapsing. Chief Okafor sank back into his chair, defeated. And I sat silently, hands folded, staring at the child I once fed from my palm. Wondering how love can raise a seed that grows into thorns. Outside the lounge, distant applause tried to fill the void. But we all knew nothing would ever be the same again. Morning came wrapped in gray clouds. The kind of sky that feels heavy with unspoken judgment. I barely slept. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed Obinna arranged for me. Hands clasped, heart aching with memories. Memories of little feet thumping on mud floors. Of laughter echoing on tin roofs. Of a small boy chasing fireflies in the dark. While I whispered prayers over his sleeping body. How that same boy could one day place me behind a generator. I may never understand. But today was not about my tears. It was about truth. The press conference hall was overflowing. Journalists crowded with cameras flashing like angry lightning. Reporters muttering in anticipation. Screens broadcasting live across the country. The stage was set with 3 microphones. And the emblem of the National Agricultural Federation behind it. Obinna entered first. Tall, controlled, eyes sharp with purpose. A wave of whispers rolled through the room. The lost general returned from the dead. He's about to expose a scandal. Will the Okafor Empire fall? Then Yuzo walked in. But this was not the proud CEO of last night's celebration. His shoulders sagged. His eyes swollen from crying. His steps heavy with a shame he could no longer outrun. Chinello followed behind him. Her makeup unable to hide the panic trembling beneath her expression. Her parents flanked her like collapsing pillars. Faces pale, confidence shattered. I watched from a front row seat. Obinna insisting I sit where the world could finally see me. For once, I did not feel small. When the microphones clicked on, Obinna stepped forward. His voice did not need to rise to be heard. Good morning. Today is not about corporations, nor wealth, nor family politics. Today is about truth. Cameras snapped like wild insects. For years, Okafor Farm Holdings has operated on land. Illegally claimed through forged documents during the post-war restoration. Gasps rippled across the hall. Chief Okafor opened his mouth to speak. But Obinna raised a hand, silencing him with ease. Evidence has been submitted to the National Audit Committee. Investigations begin today. The chief's wife nearly collapsed into her chair. Chinello clutched her trembling hands. Obinna continued. But corruption is not only in stolen land. It begins in the heart. His eyes shifted to Yuzo. And the entire room followed. Yuzo Nwoko has something he wishes to say. Yuzo stepped forward to the microphone. His breath shook so violently. I could feel it from where I sat. Yesterday, I dishonored the greatest woman in my life. He paused, swallowing grief. My grandmother, Mama Anini, raised me from nothing. She sold her last possessions to give me education. Even when it meant she slept hungry. My heart tightened. Cameras turned toward me. But I did not hide. Yuzo's voice broke. And yet, when I rose to success, I was ashamed of her. Ashamed of her simple clothes. Her village accent. The very roots that gave me life. Silence drowned the room. The kind of silence that holds its breath. I allowed people to place her near a generator. Like she was less than human. He wiped tears with the back of his shaking hand. Grandmother, if you can find it in your heart. I am begging for forgiveness. His knees buckled. And right before the world. He knelt on the cold marble floor. I choose blood over pride. I choose truth over reputation. And I choose you. The hall erupted. Not in applause. But in stunned silence. Chinello's voice cut through, sharp and desperate. Yuzo, stand up. You will ruin everything. The partnerships, the investors, the wedding. Yuzo rose slowly. His eyes burned with a fire I had not seen in years. There will be no wedding. A scream escaped Chinello's throat. You fool. You think love will feed you? You think respect can build empires? Yuzo shook his head gently. No. But it can build a life worth living. Chinello's mask cracked. Her parents pulled her away as cameras chased them like wolves. Obina placed a hand on Yuzo's shoulder. A soldier honoring a new recruit. And Yuzo turned to the hall, voice strong now. If success means stepping on the back of the woman who carried me, then I would rather walk barefoot forever. The room erupted with applause. Not polite, but thunderous. People rose to their feet. Ministers, journalists, strangers. Clapping until the sound trembled through the air like rainfall after drought. And in that moment, I felt something lift inside me. Something old. Something heavy. Dignity returned. Not from others, but from within. As the applause rose and fell, Obina leaned down to my ear and whispered. The storm has passed, sister. Now we rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because the seat that was never mine had always belonged to me. I had simply forgotten to claim it. The days that followed moved slowly. Like the soft unfurling of sunrise after a long night of rain. The newspapers carried headlines bold enough to shake the nation. Agricultural scandal exposed. General Obianwoko returns from the dead. Grandmother humiliated, truth prevails. Everyone seemed to speak my name now. The same people who would not let me sit near their perfume and crystal glasses. Life is strange. Yesterday they hid me. Today they honor me. But I have lived long enough to know. Praise and mockery are sisters. They wear different dresses but share the same blood. What matters is not applause, but the heart you carry when the world grows silent again. The foundation. 1 week later, we stood under the broad arms of an ancient Irako tree. The sky bright. The earth soft beneath our feet. Children played nearby. Their laughter floating over the dusty ground like wind-borne seeds. A crowd gathered. Farmers, widows, students, old friends from long-forgotten corners of memory. Obina stepped forward. His voice steady with purpose. Today, we launched the Anini Foundation. A program that will provide scholarships for rural children. Support widows in small-scale farming and rebuild agricultural education in this region. Applause rose. Not from polished palms dripping with diamonds, but from calloused hands that smelled of soil and hope. My heart warmed in my chest. Obina continued. This woman raised me, taught me discipline, and planted seeds that grew into the man I became. Today we honor the strength of humble women. The silent pillars of this nation. When they unveiled the sign, my knees trembled. The Anini Foundation for Rural Hope. No hand that tills the soil is ever small. Tears filled my eyes. I never sought glory. Only survival. But God gives different endings than we expect. I looked for Yuzo in the crowd, and found him standing near the stage. Face calm, eyes steady. He walked toward me slowly, stopping by the shade of the tree. Mama, he said softly. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. I placed my hands on his cheeks. The same cheeks I wiped as a feverish child. Forgiveness is not earned, I whispered. It is given. And I give it to you. He crumbled into my arms and wept. Not the tears of a fallen man, but the tears of a man reborn. People watched. Some crying quietly. Even the wind seemed to pause, listening. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Obina and I sat under the Irako tree, watching the children run barefoot through the grass. Their laughter ringing like bells. He leaned his cane against the rough bark. "Sister," he said, "I will not leave again. The world I built far away is nothing if it does not serve home." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun settle into my bones. "I thought God took you," I said. "But maybe he only hid you until the time was right." He chuckled softly. "And maybe he hid your strength too. Until the day you needed to remember it." We sat in silence, watching the wind dance through the branches, each leaf whispering a prayer we had not spoken. And in that stillness, I realized something. I may have walked through the valley of humiliation, but I did not walk alone. I may have been placed behind the generator, but my spirit never belonged there. The seat that was never mine had always been waiting, not in front of chandeliers, but here, beneath the wide sky of home. For dignity does not glitter. It grows. Slowly. Quietly. Like a seed that refuses to die. And now, it blossoms.